one thing I'm observing just as we talk it through is that, well, one, I kind of knew before, but the relationships are hard and require work. And I think everybody who's ever, you know, lived knows that, right? But this kind of relationship requires a different kind of work, right? Like, I don't know that it translates for everybody. I don't know that we can create a quote unquote model where teams can form and work and have this kind of growth together in a sustainable way. It probably is not that it's not repeatable, that it will never happen again for any other group of people at any other time, but it's unlikely to be the norm. But as Michelle said before, like some of the skills that you do at camp, it's kind of practice, right? Like I'm not sure if what we achieve at camp is always really Hesed community, like because the vulnerability through time that is necessary to be in that place, to really open yourself up and make yourself vulnerable to criticism and exhortation when it's necessary from people that you've established those trusts with. We were able to navigate the camp environment a little bit more artificially. It's a synthetic environment, but it doesn't mean that it's not a worthwhile endeavor in practice to hone the skills that you can then go back and practice in other relationships, or that you can pivot from to sustainable distance relationships with people from the CFO community. I think it's a both and. It's not. It's not a one or the other. I mean, like when you look at the way that Paul wrote in his letters and the love that he would have for people that he had only visited one time. You go, well, we only see each other once a year. How can we be in community and loving kindness for each other if we only see each other once a year? And he's like, there's people that he wrote letters to that he never saw again for his whole life, you know? And so there's something to take away from that.
But he wrote letters. I mean, he was intentional in the communication aspects that were available.
The internet this morning.
I think intentionality is such a key word in that, right? Like
it is.
In that there's a decision that we all made when we started coming together, right? And there was common purpose, and so in some ways that, you know, we're working on this toward this goal, and so there's an intentionality for this thing to happen, right? But with camp, like kind of translating it there, right? There's an intentionality when we come to camp, right? Like there's an expectation that certain things will happen, that certain kinds of relationships will be engaged with, but we don't necessarily bring that home with us, right? Like there's and maybe that's the difference between expectation and intentionality, because expectation is a bit more passive. I expect that these things will happen and I will respond this way to them. But when you're intentional, you're choosing to engage a certain way with other people. And so there it kind of goes back to being the kind of person that others can be vulnerable with, because you're also choosing to be vulnerable with them, right? And I don't know. I think the difference between passive community and intentional community, because you can be like, oh well, I'm part of this church, therefore I'm part of this community, and it be a completely passive thing. But in order for this to work, each of us had to actually be intentional. And committed, right? We showed up at the calls on Tuesday nights and we had the conversations, but we were also willing to say, this week sucked. Can we pray about X, Y, and Z? You know, the house was on fire. Can we pray? But, I mean, just because we were meeting every Tuesday night didn't mean we needed to know, you know what I mean? And that's where we had that kind of...
we lived life together.
Right, But it was a decision. Like, that didn't have to happen, but we decided to engage with each other in that way.